Hey y'all, it's Barbara from Divine Creative Love, and I'm so happy to bring you this new Bible journaling tutorial on the book of Esther. Esther is a very short book. It's an easy read, so if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it all the way through. But it tells the story of Esther and how she was made queen and how she had the opportunity to save the Hebrew people from being annihilated. So as you can see, it's only 10 chapters long. It's just a few pages. And I almost forgot to mention, I did prep my Bible page with gesso first, just to prepare it for getting painted on. And the verse that I want to focus on for this Bible journaling page is where Esther's cousin Mordecai says to her, "Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this?" Because he was trying to encourage her to take action to save her people. So for this page, I wanted to go with a celestial theme to kind of signify God's timing and purpose. It's just like in Esther's life, in our lives, we may have opportunities where we're in the right place at the right time to do something or to help someone. So, it's the idea of you were created for just such a time as this day or this moment. So I'm going to start with some acrylic paint and this paint card, and I always mix my paint with this glazing liquid. If you want to paint over the text but still have the text show up, you can mix it with that glazing liquid or with some water or just anything to thin it out and make it kind of transparent. So you can see I've used more glazing liquid than paint. And the paint card just makes a really easy way to get paint all over the page. So you just drag it across the page, and you can use it to make like a textured look if you want like more paint, or in this case I'm just giving a very, very thin sheer layer of paint across the whole page. And you can see how the text still shows up really well since that paint was thinned out. And it's always a good idea getting closer to the inside of the page, not to get too much paint on the inside of the page. And then I just smooth out the little excess paint here and there. And just to make sure that that I didn't get too much paint in between the pages, I just got a little index card and just drag it through there just to make sure there's no like globs of paint down in there. And then I always use my heat tool to dry off in between layers. If you don't have a heat tool, you could use a hairdryer, or if you just want to like walk away for 15 minutes or so and just let it dry in between steps. But the heat tool is really handy. It doesn't actually blow, so if you have anything loose like glitter or anything like that, it won't blow it away. So the next thing I was doing here is adding a darker layer of paint in the margins. So you may have noticed I didn't add any glazing liquid. I'm just using straight paint. And I decided that paint wasn't quite dark enough, so I took some darker purple paint and mixed it with some pearl luster just to make it a little more metallic like the lighter purple was. And you can see how much darker that purple was. So later I'm going to go in with the white paint pen and add the writing in the margins so it'll show up really nice against that dark purple background. Oh, and if I haven't mentioned it, I chose the color purple because purple signifies royalty, and since Esther was a queen, that seemed appropriate. So again, just drying it off between layers. Make sure all the paint is good and dry. And then the next step is to add a stamped image, just for kind of a background image in the top corner. So like I said earlier, I went with the celestial theme to signify God's divine timing. So I think one of the reasons that this book of Esther and her story resonates with us is how, she was just in the right place at the right time to do something. And, all of us have those opportunities. So you can see I'm not stamping or not inking the whole stamp, just the top part of it, just to get it on the top right corner of the page. And it didn't quite show up as well as I wanted it to, but we're going to go back in with a gold paint pen and kind of emphasize some of that. And to clean my stamps, I always just use a damp paper towel. So you can see, you can kind of see it, but it's not as visible as I would have liked it to be. So I'm just going in with this Una Posca gold paint pen and using the little drawing as reference to color in parts of the design. And I went back in later and added a little bit more emphasis on parts of it, but that's good for now. So I had plans to put the text kind of down in the middle of the side of the page. And then I wanted to add a little crown, just, because Esther was queen. So ultimately I decided to go with a smaller crown that just top part of that stamp, so I only stamped the crown part of it, not the actual word. And I used archival ink, which is smudge proof and waterproof, so it's easy to paint over it and not smudge it. And to paint in the crown, I went with the Finitech metallic watercolors because they're very opaque, so they go right over that purple background and you won't even see the purple anymore. So you can see how rich those metallic watercolors are. It's just covering up the purple completely. And those little jewels in the crown were so tiny, I ultimately decided just to paint over them instead of trying to paint them a different color. And then I went with that dark red color for the little jewels at the top of the crown. And ultimately I decided white would be the best color for that cross, to make that cross stand out. And this seems to happen every time that I do a stamp and I color it in with paints. I color over the outline of the stamp, so then I have to go back in with the micron pen and outline it. It makes it show up better. I mean, you could always leave it just, painted over, but I think it makes it stand out so much better if you can see the black outlines. So for this next step, I wanted to highlight chapter 4, verse 14, where Mordecai tells Esther, what if you were created just for such a time as this? So I'm just using a Una Posca white paint pen, which you can see shows up really well against that dark purple. And normally I would actually use a light box to trace my sketch onto the page, but I just decided to freehand it this time. And then I went back over and added a little bit more thickness to some of the letters. I thought it would be cute just to add a little decoration to separate for such a time as this from the next section, which is this list of points that I thought up that kind of applies Esther's story to situations in our own lives where we have opportunity to do something. So I'm just using a silver paint pen for the little arrow bullets, and then using the pigment micron pen to write in these thoughts that I had about Esther's story. So I just said, we are planted where we're at for a reason, whether it is in a low place or in a high place. In Esther's case, it was in a high place, but sometimes we know we're planted in somewhere where we might not want to be. But even if we think that we ended up here by mistake, and God still guides our steps. That's Proverbs 16:9, and He works all things for our good. Romans 8:28. A lot of times in life you might think that you made a wrong turn or you're not in the right place where you're supposed to be, but God can still use you where you're at. So He works all things for the good of those who love Him and who have been called according to His purpose. And sometimes fulfilling our purpose comes with a great personal risk, but we should still do it. In Esther's case, it was a risk for her to approach the king and ask for her people to be saved, but she did it. She needed a little encouragement, but she did it. And so the last point is just never give up or grow weary in doing what is right. It may take several tries. It might be a long process, but we should keep pressing on in spite of the obstacles. I'd like to think that maybe Esther had some cold feet in approaching the king. She hosted a banquet, and then she told the king that if he came back tomorrow, then had another banquet, that then she would tell him what her request was. So it's kind of like almost like Esther had to kind of work up to it. So here I'm just underlining verse 14 for emphasis. So the cool thing to remember is that Esther was just a person like you or I, and she was just in the right time to take action and do something, and it might have been scary to do that, but she still did it. So you can see, I think it turned out really great. Very royal and appropriate for Esther's story, and also just significant for God's divine timing in each of our lives. And thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any of my future videos. And I'll see you next time. Bye!